had a problem with anger. I knew I do. I might be, just happy-go-lucky now, and someone get me mad.
I remember him coming up to me in the kitchen. He was really upset, and he was crunching his fists and shaking. He said, "Dad, I need..."
Eric Smith, Savona, New York, August 1993. A quiet summer morning in a small town. A 4-year-old walking to camp alone. A 13-year-old who intercepted him. And a family that has spent 3 decades asking whether a door that was opened should ever have been. The victim, Derek Robbie, was 4 years old. He set off for summer camp alone on August 2, 1993, in Savona, New York, a town where children roamed freely and parents trusted their neighbors. He never arrived. Hours later, his battered body was discovered in a wooded area just a short walk from his home. He had been strangled, beaten, and left in the dirt. The perpetrator. Eric Smith was 13 years old. Freckle-faced, red-haired, slight for his age. He had been a target of bullies for years. Classmates mocked his thick glasses, prominent ears, and awkward mannerisms. At home, he was described as quiet, sometimes withdrawn, but never violent. On that summer morning, Smith encountered Derek walking to camp. He coaxed the younger child off the sidewalk and into a nearby patch of trees. There, he strangled Derek, struck him repeatedly with rocks, and left him where he fell. The motive, investigators would later conclude, was not a personal grudge against Derek. It was rooted in Smith's own pain. Years of humiliation and isolation, compounded by mental health struggles, had left him angry and desperate to exert control. That rage found a tragic outlet in a 4-year-old who had simply crossed his path. The confession. Days later, Smith confessed to his mother. He could not keep the secret. He sat in a police interview room and recounted the details with unsettling clarity. His manner, at times detached, at times even smiling, shocked everyone in the room. It was hard to reconcile the violence with the boy in front of them. The trial. The trial began in 1994. Prosecutors painted Smith as remorseless, driven by rage and resentment. The defense focused on his history of being bullied, presenting him as a damaged child shaped by years of cruelty. Psychologists testified about his emotional struggles and social isolation. The jury found Eric Smith guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 9 years to life in prison, the maximum allowed for a juvenile at the time. The 3 decades. Smith spent nearly 30 years behind bars. During that time, he pursued therapy and education, eventually earning a college degree while incarcerated. Prison records and mental health professionals documented what was described as a transformation. Genuine remorse, developed empathy, a growing understanding of the magnitude of what he had done. But Derek Robbie's family was never convinced. Every time Smith came up for parole, and there were many attempts, they fought for him to remain behind bars. Derek's mother said in hearing after hearing, "A child's life was taken. There can never be enough time served." The release. In February 2022, Eric Smith was granted parole. He walked out of prison after 28 years, having spent more time incarcerated than he had ever lived as a free boy. The decision drew immediate controversy. Derek's family and much of the Savona community opposed his release. The parole board cited his remorse, his rehabilitation, and the recommendations of mental health professionals who had evaluated him over decades. As of 2025, Eric Smith lives quietly in upstate New York. His exact location is undisclosed. He is forbidden from contacting the Robbie family. For some, his release is proof that people, even those who commit the unthinkable, can change. For others, it is a reminder that justice can never erase the past. Both of those things are true simultaneously.
A Norfolk teenager admitted to stabbing his own parents to death.
I don't know what happened myself. I'm sure he can't remember what happened. So we just ask God to pray for him. He is a smart young man, Yeah, he is smart in school.
Vincent Parker, Norfolk, Virginia, December 2013. This case begins with a confiscated iPod. It ends with 2 bodies and a 40-year prison sentence. And no one who knew this family has ever been able to explain what happened inside a teenager who, by every account, had been raised right. The family, Wayne and Carol Parker, were devoted parents, active in their church, known for their warmth and their discipline. Vincent, their only child, was quiet, rarely drew attention. No warning signs of chaos, no calls to police, no stories of violence or neglect. The discipline in the Parker home was strict but fair. Confiscated electronics when grades slipped, grounding for disrespect, routine parenting by any reasonable measure. But inside Vincent, resentment was growing. The plan: in the days leading up to the murders, his parents had confiscated his iPod, a seemingly minor consequence for a minor infraction. For Vincent, it felt like the latest in a string of unfair punishments. The anger simmered, and then he made a plan. On December 19, 2013, Vincent waited until his father, Wayne, returned home for lunch. Armed with pepper spray and a knife, he attacked Wayne in the upstairs bathroom. Wayne Parker, a man who had spent his life providing for his family, never had a chance. After the attack, Vincent left the house. He returned later that afternoon when his mother, Carol, arrived from work. He assaulted her in the hallway, striking her repeatedly and inflicting fatal injuries. He had prepared the weapons in advance. He knew when each parent would be home. He returned for the second attack deliberately. The confession: when police arrived at the Parker residence, Vincent was at the scene. He did not attempt to run. He made no effort to cover up the crime or hide what he had done. He confessed immediately. He told detectives he had been angry over being disciplined, especially after his iPod was taken away. The confession was chilling in its clarity and calmness. No wild story, no attempt to blame anyone else. Just a young man sitting quietly, admitting he had killed the only people who had ever truly cared for him. The community response: the news swept through Norfolk. Extended family, church members, and teachers described the Parkers as loving but firm, never abusive or neglectful. Vincent's actions were met with universal shock. One relative told the court they were good parents. He was a good kid. It doesn't make sense. The outcome: prosecutors charged Vincent as an adult. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to 60 years with 20 suspended, an effective 40-year sentence reflecting the planned nature of the attacks, the brutality, and the utter loss suffered by everyone who knew this family. The judge remarked, "There are no winners here. 2 lives lost, a 3rd destroyed, a family erased in a single day." As of 2025, Vincent Parker remains behind bars in a Virginia correctional facility. There have been no appeals, no public statements. He has faded from the headlines. But for those who knew the Parkers, the scars remain. A teenage grievance, a confiscated iPod, parental discipline that was meant to guide, not destroy, and no explanation that has ever made sense of what it became.
Did you ever look up on the computer and do research on psychopaths?
Yeah, I looked up sociopath and psychopath because I always found it fascinating, and the more I've aged, the more I can relate, because I don't feel sympathy for other people. I want to kill people, but I don't want to want that.
Daniel Marsh, Davis, California, April 2013. A 15-year-old, an unlocked back door, an elderly couple asleep in their bed, and a confession that described what he did in clinical terms, with a composure that alarmed everyone in the room because his motive was curiosity. The victims: Claudia Moping was 76 years old. Oliver Chip Northup was 87. A married couple, well known in Davis, California for their kindness and involvement in the community. They were neighbors. Daniel Marsh knew of them only as that, On the night of April 14, 2013, Marsh slipped through their unlocked back door, armed with a hunting knife. He found them asleep in their bed. He attacked them without warning. He took his time. The crime was not hurried or impulsive. He explored the boundaries of cruelty with a calculated detachment. By the time he left, both Claudia and Oliver were dead, killed in a place they had always believed was safe. The motive? When Marsh was eventually apprehended, what he told detectives proved more disturbing than anyone had anticipated. He said he had acted out of curiosity. He wanted to know what it felt like to kill. The confession was matter-of-fact, delivered with a composure that alarmed everyone in the room. He showed no visible emotion. Who he was. To most who knew him, Marsh was an ordinary high school sophomore. Slender, soft-spoken, and often described as intelligent. But beneath the surface, Marsh had struggled with darkness for years. He had suffered a serious brain injury as a child. In adolescence, he battled depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. He was taking antidepressants. His family had sought help from counselors and doctors. Despite those interventions, his mental health continued to spiral. Friends recalled he sometimes spoke about violence in abstract, disturbing ways. But no one imagined he could act on those thoughts. The confession and the trial. In video recordings played in court, Marsh calmly recounted how he entered the house, how he inflicted pain, and how he watched his victims die. He did not deny his guilt. He did not attempt to deflect blame. He seemed almost eager to recount what he had done, as if the memory was something to be shared, not hidden. Oh, mental health experts who examined him were divided. Some believed his history of injury and medication played a role. Others pointed to classic signs of psychopathy, lack of empathy, emotional detachment, a fascination with suffering. The verdict was swift. Daniel Marsh was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, with special circumstances for torture. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, citing both the savagery of the crime and no indication that Marsh could ever safely rejoin society. The resentencing attempt. In 2021, Marsh's attorneys filed for early release under California's juvenile resentencing laws. The argument: as a teenager, his brain was still developing, and rehabilitation should remain a possibility. The parole board disagreed. They cited the lack of remorse and an ongoing fascination with violence. His application was denied. As of August 2025, Daniel Marsh remains incarcerated in a California state prison. His case has become the subject of podcasts and documentaries, each attempt to explain his actions running into the same barrier. The chilling sense that for Daniel Marsh, the line between curiosity and cruelty was dangerously thin. For Claudia and Oliver, there is no answer. Only the memory of a crime that should never have happened.
Philip Chism was just 14 years old when he was convicted of killing his math teacher, Colleen Ritzer. He's serving a 25-year sentence for murder, along with a 40-year...
Philip Chism, Danvers, Massachusetts, October 2013. A 14-year-old arrived at school with gloves, a box cutter, and a change of clothes already packed in his bag. His math teacher was 24 years old. She stayed after school to help students who were struggling. The crime happened in a second-floor bathroom, and the community that trusted its schools has never fully recovered its sense of safety. The victim, Colleen Ritzer, was only 24 years old, a bright, caring math teacher beloved by her students for her patience and dedication. Known for going the extra mile, staying after school to tutor, offering encouragement to those who struggled. On October 22, 2013, in Danvers, Massachusetts, she would not make it home. The perpetrator, Philip Chism, had recently moved from Tennessee with his mother. The transition was difficult. Teachers noticed he was withdrawn, quiet, often seeming lost. But there was nothing to suggest what was coming, until security cameras captured him following Colleen Ritzer into a second-floor bathroom after class. What happened next was swift and merciless. The evidence: after killing her, Chism concealed Colleen's body in a recycling bin, dragged it out of the school, and left it in a nearby wooded area. He attempted to cover his tracks. The search for Colleen Ritzer began almost immediately when she failed to return home. By nightfall, police had discovered her remains behind the school grounds. Philip Chism did not get far. He was found hours later walking along Route 1 in a neighboring town. In his backpack, bloody clothes and Ritzer's credit cards. DNA fingerprints and surveillance footage connected him irrefutably to the scene. The planning. The investigation quickly uncovered the extent of Chism's preparation. He had arrived at school that day with gloves, a box cutter, and a change of clothes. Items he used in carrying out and concealing the crime. He had selected his victim. He had prepared his materials. He had chosen the location. This was not an impulsive act. In court, his behavior was often erratic, sometimes appearing distracted or confused, at other times showing almost no emotion at all. Mental health professionals were brought in to evaluate his competency. The court found him fit to stand trial. The verdict: Philip Chism was convicted of first-degree murder, along with additional charges related to the attack and his attempts to conceal it. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole when he turns 40, reflecting both the seriousness of his actions and his age at the time. But even in prison, Chism's troubling behavior continued. He attacked staff members while incarcerated, prompting further concerns about his mental state and risk to others. In February 2025, Chism's attempt to appeal his conviction and sentence was denied. The court found no grounds for reconsideration. Philip Chism remains behind bars in Massachusetts. What makes this case so haunting is the betrayal of trust at its core. A student, barely more than a child himself, destroyed the life of a teacher whose only goal was to help him succeed. For the people of Danvers and for educators everywhere, the echoes of that day remain. Stop right here. If you are still watching, 5 more cases ahead. A 14-year-old and her 15-year-old boyfriend, who spent 36 hours in a house with the bodies of the people they had killed, eating ice cream, watching Twilight, because they had made a pact they called the plan. A 14-year-old who shot his classmate in the head from behind in a school computer lab because he couldn't accept who that classmate was choosing to be, and the hung jury and national debate that followed. A 12-year-old, Britain's youngest female killer ever tried and convicted in a modern court, who kept a diary celebrating the 32 stab wounds she had inflicted on a stranger, and whose bid for parole was denied more than 30 years later. A 14-year-old honor student who was groomed by a 20-year-old into believing that killing her mother was the only way they could be together, and the appeals process still arguing over whether she should be seen as a perpetrator or a victim. And Case 9, bringing the full picture of what these 9 cases say about youth, justice, and the questions no sentence has ever fully answered. 30 seconds. Subscribe. This community examines difficult cases carefully, with sources, with nuance, and with respect for every life involved. Like. Tell the algorithm that coverage like this deserves to be seen. Share. Someone following true crime needs to see these 9 cases assembled carefully in one place. Type subscribed. Now. Case 5.
Well, ever since, I was young, I've never got on with my mum. I knew that she favoured my sister more than me. And even though she said that she didn't, I knew that she was lying.
Kim Edwards and Lucas Markham, Spalding, Lincolnshire, England, April 2016. A 14-year-old and her 15-year-old boyfriend. A pact they called the plan. 2 people stabbed in their beds in the same night, and 36 hours spent in the house afterward, eating ice cream, watching Twilight, because neither of them had a plan for what came next. The victims: Elizabeth Edwards and her youngest daughter Katie, 13 years old, were found dead in their beds in Spalding, Lincolnshire, on April 12, 2016. The perpetrators were Elizabeth's own daughter, Kim Edwards, just 14 years old, and Kim's boyfriend, Lucas Markham, 15. Overnight, their names became synonymous with one of Britain's youngest and most disturbing double murders. The plan: Kim harbored deep anger toward her mother, Elizabeth. She believed she was treated unfairly compared to her younger sister. Lucas, struggling with his own troubled background, became Kim's confidant and partner. Together they cultivated a world apart from reality, a place where, inspired by fantasy, they could justify the unthinkable. Text messages and interviews revealed that the pair had discussed the murder in detail for weeks. How, when, what they would do after. They referred to it as the plan, a secret pact forged out of anger, alienation, and a misguided belief in their own love story. The level of premeditation stunned investigators. The night Kim and Lucas entered the Edwards home late at night. Armed with kitchen knives, they moved quietly through the dark. First, Elizabeth's bedroom. As she slept, they stabbed her repeatedly. Then they turned to Katie, Kim's 13-year-old sister, whose only crime was being home that night. The attack was swift, silent, and devastating. What followed? Kim and Lucas did not run. Instead, they spent the next 36 hours in the house with the bodies of their victims. Oh, they ate ice cream. They watched films, including Twilight, the series that by their own account had inspired their sense of romance and shared destiny. To the outside world, nothing seemed wrong. Inside those walls, two children sat calmly in the shadow of what they had done. How it ended. When Elizabeth failed to appear at work, colleagues grew concerned. Police arrived at the home to find Kim and Lucas still inside, calmly waiting. There had been no attempt to hide, no plan for what would come next. When questioned, Kim told officers, "I felt nothing." Lucas admitted his role with a similar absence of emotion. The trial and verdict. The trial captivated and horrified the public. Never before had Britain seen defendants so young standing trial for a double murder. Mental health professionals testified that together, Kim and Lucas reinforced each other's darkest thoughts, escalating fantasies into deadly reality. Experts described their bond as a folie à deux, a shared psychosis where two people lock each other into a reality detached from the world around them. Their fascination with fictional love stories became a disturbing lens through which they justified their actions. Both were given life sentences with a minimum term of 17.5 years, reduced slightly on appeal, but still among the harshest terms ever given to teenagers in the UK. As of 2025, Kim Edwards and Lucas Markham remain incarcerated, serving out the sentences imposed on them as children. A mother and daughter gone in a single night. Their lives ended by those they loved. Brandon McInerney, Oxnard, California, February 2008. A 14-year-old shot his 15-year-old classmate in the head from behind in a school computer lab because he could not accept who that classmate was choosing to be. The first trial ended in a hung jury. The national debate that followed never ended. The victim, Lawrence Larry King, was 15. Known for his expressive style and courage, Larry had recently begun to embrace his identity, sometimes wearing makeup, jewelry, and high-heeled boots to school. For some classmates, he was a target for taunts. For others, a symbol of authenticity and self-expression. His openness set him apart, and tragically, it put him in the crosshairs of a troubled classmate. The perpetrator, Brandon McInerney, was 14, just a year younger. Quiet, athletic, and withdrawn. He came from a home marked by chaos. Social workers and court records would later reveal a childhood shaped by instability, violence at home, exposure to racist and homophobic views, and little sense of security. By the winter of 2008, McInerney's world was one of simmering anger and confusion, much of it unspoken. The conflict and the ACT. The conflict between the two boys escalated over weeks. Larry, perhaps emboldened by new confidence, had been making advances toward Brandon, notes, compliments, and at times public displays. Teachers noticed tension and tried to intervene. No one foresaw what was coming. On the morning of February 12, 2008, during first period, Brandon walked into the computer lab. He approached Larry from behind. He drew a handgun from his backpack. He fired 2 shots at close range. The classroom erupted into chaos. Larry King was pronounced brain dead 2 days later. Brandon McInerney made no attempt to flee. He was detained within minutes. The investigation and the debate. Investigators determined the attack was motivated by deep-seated feelings about Larry's gender expression and sexuality. Prosecutors argued it was a hate crime fueled by intolerance and a desire to silence someone who dared to be different. The defense focused on Brandon's upbringing, the violence at home, exposure to hateful ideologies, and the failure of adults to help him learn to manage anger or understand difference. The courtroom became a battleground. Advocates for LGBTQ+ rights demanded justice. Others argued Brandon's age, background, and emotional immaturity should factor into how he was punished. The first trial ended in a hung jury, reflecting how difficult it was for the community and the country to agree on what justice looked like in a case this complex. The case forced a reckoning within the school and the wider community. National media descended. Administrators reviewed policies. The conversation about school safety and hate took on new urgency. The outcome: Brandon eventually accepted a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, and use of a firearm. He was sentenced to 21 years, reflecting both the seriousness of the crime and the complexity of his circumstances. The hate crime enhancement was not applied, a decision that drew criticism from many advocates who felt the motivation was undeniable. Brandon McInerney was released from prison around 2022, having served his sentence with credits for good behavior. His current whereabouts are unknown. For some, his release is an opportunity for redemption. For others, it is a reminder of a wound that can never truly heal. For Larry King's family, for LGBTQ+ communities, and for everyone who followed this case, the question lingers. How does hate take root in someone so young? And could this tragedy have been prevented if the warning signs had been taken seriously? Sharon Carr. Farnborough, Hampshire, England, June 1992. A 12-year-old girl. A knife. A stranger on a suburban footpath. 32 stab wounds. And a diary kept afterward. Not to process guilt, but to celebrate what she had done. This is the youngest perpetrator in this compilation, and the one whose parole applications have been most consistently denied. The victim, Katie Ratcliffe, was 18 years old, just making her way home from a friend's house on the evening of June 7, 1992, in Farnborough, Hampshire. She never made it. On a suburban footpath, she was ambushed by someone no one could have imagined was a threat. Sharon Carr was 12 years old. Armed with a kitchen knife, she attacked Katie without warning or provocation. In a frenzied assault, she stabbed her 32 times. The violence was shocking, not only for its savagery, but for its randomness. There was no connection between Carr and Katie Ratcliffe. No history, no grudge, no reason. The cold case. The initial investigation yielded few clues. The case went cold. In the meantime, Sharon Carr returned to her troubled life, a childhood marked by instability and violence, a home ruled by a violent father figure where fear and aggression had become routine. Even among broken homes in the area, Sharon Carr stood out. Teachers and social workers noted her fascination with violence and death, and an unsettling sense of detachment from the world around her. Over the next 2 years, Carr's behavior grew more concerning. She began keeping a diary. Pages filled not with the worries or dreams of a young girl, but with graphic, detailed accounts of the murder. She wrote about the pleasure she took in killing. She boasted about the details of Katie's final moments. The entries were chilling in their pride and in the total absence of regret. For Carr, the crime was not a source of guilt. It was a source of triumph. How she was caught. In 1994, now aged 14, Carr launched a violent attack on a fellow student. She was arrested. In custody, her disturbing writings were discovered. Investigators quickly connected the details to the unsolved Ratcliffe case. Carr confessed in police interviews. She described the attack on Katie in the same cold, matter-of-fact tone as her diary entries. She seemed almost proud. The trial and conviction. The trial gripped the nation. Carr was charged with murder, making her Britain's youngest female killer ever tried and convicted in a court of law. Psychiatrists who examined Carr found a profound lack of empathy. They noted her obsession with death, her inability to understand the value of human life, and her ongoing fantasies about violence. The court found Sharon Carr guilty. She was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 14 years before parole could even be considered. What happened in prison? Carr's behavior inside prison continued to concern authorities. She attacked other inmates. She showed little sign of remorse or rehabilitation. Each review painted the same picture. A young woman still fascinated by violence, still disconnected from the gravity of her actions. Her attempts for early release were met with unanimous opposition. In 2023, more than 3 decades after the murder, Carr's bid for parole was denied. Authorities determined she continued to pose a serious risk to public safety. She had spent nearly her entire life behind bars. As of 2025, Sharon Carr remains incarcerated in the UK, serving her life sentence. For the family of Katie Ratcliffe, the loss was made more unfathomable by the age and nature of her killer. A 12-year-old who attacked a stranger on a footpath, kept a diary celebrating it, and has spent more than 30 years unable to satisfy a parole board that she no longer poses a danger. Allentown, Pennsylvania, March 2015. A 14-year-old honors student, a 20-year-old Army specialist who became the center of her world, a mother who saw the danger and tried to stop it, and a conspiracy that ended with a body in a car trunk, and a legal battle still ongoing a decade later over whether Jaime was a perpetrator, a victim, or both. The victim, Cheryl Silvanic, was a devoted mother who saw the warning signs clearly. Her daughter Jaime, 14 years old, an honor student, bright and expressive, had become involved with Caleb Barnes, a 20-year-old Army specialist. The age gap, the intensity, the secrecy, all alarmed Cheryl. She voiced her concerns. She read Jaime's texts. She questioned her about her whereabouts. She set firm limits, classic signs of a parent desperate to protect her child. For Jaime and Caleb, Cheryl's vigilance became fuel for resentment. The conspiracy, messages recovered by police, showed a growing obsession with removing anyone who stood in the way of their relationship. They discussed methods, timing, the future they imagined once Cheryl was gone. On March 13, 2015, the plan became reality. Jaime invited her mother to what Cheryl believed would be a concert, a chance for reconciliation, a night to reconnect. It was a trap. On the drive home, as the car sat parked on a secluded road, Barnes attacked Cheryl. The violence was brutal, deliberate, and final. Jaime, present at the scene, did nothing to stop it. Cheryl's body was found in the trunk of her own car. The investigation, the alibi unraveled almost immediately. Police obtained the text messages between Jaime and Caleb, long, detailed chains chronicling their planning and intent, methods, timing, and the future they imagined once Cheryl was gone. The digital trail was unmistakable. The competing narratives. Prosecutors argued Jaime had played an active and knowing role in the conspiracy. The evidence of premeditation was overwhelming. Defense attorneys pointed to the vast difference in age and experience between Jaime and Caleb, suggesting she had been groomed, manipulated, and coerced into a crime she could not fully comprehend. Experts in adolescent psychology testified about Jaime's vulnerability, the susceptibility of teenagers to influence by older dominant partners, and the way fantasy and reality can blur for those caught in obsessive relationships. The jury had to weigh both of those realities simultaneously, the verdict and the appeals. Jaime Silvanic was tried as an adult and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. She received a sentence of 35 years to life, an extraordinary term for someone so young, but one the court deemed appropriate given the gravity of her actions. Caleb Barnes was sentenced to life without parole. Jaime's legal team has launched a series of appeals, arguing that her immaturity and Caleb's manipulative influence were not properly weighed. Family members, including her father, have joined the call for reconsideration, urging authorities to see her as a victim as well as a perpetrator. In 2023, a Pennsylvania court denied her bid for a new trial, citing the evidence of careful planning and willful participation. As of September 2025, Jaime Silvanic remains incarcerated. She is now seeking commutation of her sentence, supported by family who believed she was too young, too vulnerable, and too manipulated to be held to the same standard as an adult killer. For Cheryl Silvanic, the desire to protect her daughter proved fatal. For Jaime, the line between victim and perpetrator remains forever blurred. A reminder that in the darkest crimes, innocence and guilt are sometimes more entangled than anyone wants to believe.